Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Nashua Conservation Commission for December 5th. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Parati?
Present.
Chairwoman Sarno? Chairwoman Dutzy?
Present.
Commissioner Sarno?
Here.
Commissioner Crook is here. Commissioner McCarthy?
Present.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum, thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the November 8th, 2023 regular meeting. Does anybody have any corrections or additions? Commissioner Sarno?
On page 3, in the treasurer's report, the second to last sentence has $11,800 for Gate City fence and miscellaneous expenses. This should be, I think it's $8,400. I think $11,800 is the total expenses for the entire year.
And I'm sorry, I had to turn off my phone. What do you think the number should be?
8,400 is my recollection.
8,400? Okay. Anybody else have any other additions or corrections? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion? Commissioner Crook? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve as amended and place on file the minutes of November 8th. Do I have a second? Commissioner Sarno seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, old business, we have Gore Environmental Services on behalf of the City of Nashua. This is regarding the disc golf course. The way I would like to handle it tonight is that the applicants and their agents will be speaking first and discussing any of the changes that have been made since the last time we met. After that, we will have a period of public comment, and people can come forward, introduce themselves, their name and their address, and limit their comments to about 3 minutes pro or con for the disc golf course. So is anybody representing? Okay, Mr. Hudson? Thank you.
Thank you.
And please speak loudly, because I
will, and I'm mumble,
okay.
So I'll try hard. Good evening, commissioners, city staff, and members of the public. My name is Daniel Hudson. I'm a New Hampshire licensed professional engineer here representing the Division of Public Works in my capacity as a city engineer. With me tonight is Lisa Foto, the DPW director, as well as Brendan Quigley, a New Hampshire certified wetland scientist with GOV Environmental Services. Brendan will speak to the specifics of the application, particularly to the changes that have been made since we last met and since you last saw plans. I'm here to kind of do an introduction, but I hope you found that ever since the issue was raised about the work in the wetland buffer in spring of 2022, I hope you found that we've worked professionally to address it. We halted work, we engaged GOV Environmental Services, a preeminent firm in the field. We had certified individuals delineate and locate the wetland boundaries and buffers. And we generated a comprehensive plans that show the work that was completed to the best of our ability based upon the field evidence at that time and discussions with those that had completed the work. And we detailed the remaining work, the planned work, to complete the project. Throughout the process, we've listened to input received from the commission and the public, and we've adjusted the plans and approach accordingly, which Brendan will speak to. Although one of DPW's roles is to provide recreation opportunities in the city's parks, the project originated through a grassroots effort of the 500 plus residents that are supporting this project the same residents that you all also serve in your role as commission members. There are approximately 71 disc golf courses in New Hampshire, many of which are located within wetland buffers, so the use in such areas is not unprecedented, and we feel it can be implemented here in Nashua with little to no effect on the wetlands. With that, I'll turn it over to Brendan to speak to the specifics of the application and the changes, as was mentioned, have been made since we last met.
Good evening. For the record, Brendan Quigley with GOV Environmental Services. I'm a certified wetland scientist in New Hampshire, and it's been my pleasure to work with the Commission on a number of projects. So this is the first time that we've been before you since our site walk this July, and I hope that was helpful. I know it was helpful for us to hear some of the concerns, especially after viewing some of these areas together, in the field. The submittal that we have before you tonight incorporates a number of specific things that were changed in response to some of the concerns we heard during the site walk, as well as offering some additional information and clarification on particularly the remainder of the project. The focus has been largely, I think, the work that was started initially, but there are some important differences that I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. So as far as specific items, new items, in response to what I believe was a significant amount of concern focused around the first few holes on the way in that were cleared of rather wide swath across the main stream. We've incorporated a proposal to do some additional planting in those areas in the most effective area down towards the stream. And that is sort of twofold. One is for buffer function, although these areas are stable and re-vegetating quite well over the past year, they would likely benefit from some help, in that most important area right by the stream. Secondly, they'll help to screen and sort of cordon off the resource area from people wishing to maybe cross it in areas where they shouldn't. And I know that was a significant concern in general about the disc golf course, and I believe that this restoration proposal will help with that. And that consists of, there's a detail on sheet C1.1, and it's relatively simple. Approximately 10 shrubs along the lower portion of the buffer in the disturbed areas on those fairways. I've chosen species, shrub species, which are well suited to the shaded forest setting, and approximately 75 in total, which should provide a good buffer planting at about 8 foot on center. The second thing that was incorporated as in direct response to some of the comments on the site walk was some changes to the proposed bridges, well, to the trail system in general. 3 new bridges were added in existing crossings, actually, where I think everyone agreed there could be some improvement. And of course, this will benefit the disc golf project, but is also it can be viewed as an improvement in general to the park's trails. And those are located. Descriptions are a little bit difficult, but the sort of the main crossing.
Mr. Quigley, can I just interrupt for
Sure.
1 second? I'd like the people to know, if you want, there are large-scale maps up here. If you, if you need to look at them, feel free to come up. And I think there's a couple that you can take, although, unless you're sitting next to an empty seat, it may not be helpful. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. So the most substantial of these is probably on the sort of the main trail, main entrance to the trail system along Fairway 18. This is an existing trail. This area was disturbed initially by the initial work, but it is a wet area where there certainly could be some improvement in the crossing in that area, which to date has been accomplished by just a number of planks being laid on the ground. So that'll be now, a formal crossing like the other proposed bridges will be used in that area, which should, both keep people from trying to go around wet areas, which is typically leads to a widening of the trail, and more disturbance. So that will help focus traffic in that area. Again, for the disc golf course project, but also for the trail system in general. 2 other new bridges are included on the trail, between 7 and 8, the fairway 7 and 8, and those are existing crossings, trail crossings, which have currently accomplished with just some stepping stones, and those will similarly be upgraded to formal trail bridges, which will, keep people out of the wetlands, keep people's feet dry, and people are more likely to utilize a bridge than they would be to cross where they feel they might be able to get across easiest. So that's a benefit overall. Additionally, there's a couple other small changes. The bridge that was serving fairways 3 and 4 was previously located to one side, to the left side of fairway 3. There was a lot of discussion about, in general, about focusing people, players, to the areas where we're intended to cross, where we have bridges and formal crossings, rather than ad hoc crossings in other areas. So this was done to address that, and it's been relocated between the 2 fairways to better serve both of them. Lastly, as far as changes to the trails and access, there was a couple of sections of trail actually located outside the buffer, but since they were discussed, we included them. One is visible right there, just to the left of the number 4. That's a really steep section, which I think was, the feeling was was not only potential erosion hazard, but also a safety hazard. So that's been rerouted to the more obvious lower gradient path between those 2 points. The other section is really just a correction of the plans, and that's not shown on here, but it's also outside the buffer. Between it's fairways 13 and 7, there's a section of trail which shown on the plans didn't represent what was actually out in the park, and so that's been corrected at this point. And that was just because of record information being used for the plan set. Lastly, and I think importantly, I'd like to clarify some of the remaining work, particularly contrasting it with what was, started. I know the original work that was done, those areas were cleared thoroughly and quite a bit wider than is actually necessary for a wooded course like this. So the additional disturbance areas shown on the plans and the numbers have not changed. Those areas going forward will be a 10-foot wide width. And in that area, there's a number of trees that are proposed to be cut. That number has only changed in one area on hole 8, where there was a tree count during the site walk, and it was noted that they were off by 2 in that area. So those have been added. Otherwise, the number of trees being cut for the remainder of the project has not changed. But I don't think it was as clear as it could have been what the remaining work was relative to undergrowth removal, as is expressed on the plans. That will, going forward, that 10-foot wide swath through the buffer, it will not be cleared anything even close to what was viewed on the way in on fairways 17, 16, and 15. These will, going forward, those areas will be essentially pruned. The shrubs in those areas will be pruned using hand tools only to the extent necessary to provide, a clear path through the area. And, I think one of the things that stood out to me, at least, as I hadn't been at the site for some time since we started, was that very little pruning is probably actually going to be necessary for the remaining work. The same is true through the restoration area that we proposed. The details up on the screen now. Only a 10-foot wide area through those sections will be subject to ongoing maintenance, which will be done in the same way, just using hand tools to cut, individual branches or individual shrubs, much the same as you would for any trail maintenance in Nashua. There's a minimum amount of work that goes into keeping these areas clean for your regular trails to function. That's essentially what the rest of the work will be like in regards to that underbrush clearing. The ordinance did not have I think there was a little less clear than it could have been, because there doesn't seem to be a a good category that fits in the ordinance for that impact. So it's expressed as a number, which, on its face seems rather large, but in practice for this type of work really amounts to a trail maintenance type of activity. Similarly or related, there still will be some equipment needed for the project to carry in materials and to excavate small area for the footing of the baskets, for instance, all of which are located outside the buffer. And the primary distinction I want to draw here is that equipment won't be operating in the buffer in the way that was done initially. So an access plan has been worked out whereby equipment can access all the areas that's needed, utilizing a few existing access areas and existing trails to get to everywhere that you need to without driving through vegetated buffers. So really the equipment is basically not going to be disturbing anything. The pruning amounts to several branches, and that material will just be left in the area. It's typically the better thing to do. We don't have to take material out of the buffer. That brush actually lends itself to habitat, as well as I'll add discouraging, off-path travel, which could include, the buffer areas or wetland areas. I've also discussed with Lisa the possibility, should the commission feel it's necessary, of having a monitoring component for the work, particularly the more sensitive areas, just to give a level of comfort that what I've described will be adhered to. And I don't doubt that it will, but I understand that the commission might want that extra assurance. And we'd be happy to discuss, the exact parameters of that. But it would typically be involved in the buffer areas, and the restoration areas would be monitored for during the cutting, any kind of cutting to establish the fairways. That covers everything new that's changed. I think with that, I know there'll be some questions and deliberation, so if there's no immediate questions, I think maybe would move to that.
Yes, would the commissioners want to do a question and answer period now, and once that's over, then we'll open it up to public comment? Does that seem reasonable? Okay. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, Commissioner Parati?
Would you be willing to, for the restoration plant list, to go with 3-gallon size plants, 24 or 36 inches, as opposed to the 1 gallon that are spec'd?
I'm sure we can look into that. It does not seem like an impossible ask. There's not a lot of shrubs, so alternatively, there could be a higher number of the smaller shrubs. I know that's often the approach, sort of hedge against some failure. That's why the smaller 1 gallon ones might be more appropriate, but I can discuss that with the city department.
So, Commissioner Parati, your preference would be to have fewer plants but larger ones planted? Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
No, for the viburnum and the clethra, probably the same quantity, but 3-gallon pot, 24 to 36 inches. And for the blueberry, I mean, probably could stick with the 1 gallon for the blueberry, but maybe increase it to, I don't know, somewhere between 30 and 50.
Mhm. Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Sarno?
So I have some questions and concerns. So we all understand that we're here because the Conservation Commission is charged with ensuring compliance with the city's wetland ordinances. And we all know that these ordinances apply equally to all. I think a statement we can all agree with is that a buffer around a wetland helps protect the quality and function of a wetland, and that trees, shrubs, ground cover, and other vegetation help to filter contaminants and slow storm runoff, and that dense mats of leaf cover, leaf litter also slow and filter stormwater runoff. And basically, the quality of a wetland is directly impacted by the quality of the wetland buffer. In the GOV wetlands report, you describe the area as a narrow valley with steep slopes leading down to a southerly flowing stream, which is denoted Complex A. The primary function of this wetland is noted as water quality, wildlife habitat, visual quality, aesthetics, recreation. Water quality, you state, is an important function in developed areas such as this. This is a kind of a park that's in the middle of a very developed area. And you state that dense vegetation is good at trapping nutrients. You also state that this likely supports a secondary flood attenuation function. And in addition, the combination of stream, forested wetland, and emergent wetland elevate the importance of the area for wildlife habitat. So my concerns are, with this proposal, we have 5 fairways that cross Complex A and 5 bridges that cross Wetland Complex A. All fairways cross A. They involve a steep slope down and steep slope up on the other side of the fairway. Hole 3 has a particularly steep slope, and this was noted in the July 17th site walk. I don't see any indication that that was addressed in your comments. The basket for hole 3 is just outside the buffer, but basically you cross the stream and then you have a very steep slope. The basket's right on top of the buffer. So this is going to be a 10-foot swath of less basically cleared vegetation, and that is definitely going to lead to erosion, and of course we noted safety concerns at the time. Generally, promoting foot traffic within a buffer leads to soil compaction, which increases runoff, and trampling of vegetation in these areas will definitely lead to erosion. In this project, there are a total of 10 fairways that either cross or run parallel to a wetland or a buffer. Fairway 4 crosses 2 wetlands. I mean, to me, it seems clear that the plan was developed without regard to wetlands or wetland buffers. And I believe that you came in well after the initial plan was developed. I'm just going to continue on, unless you want to address any of the comments that I've made, particularly about hole 3.
Yeah, so I would like to respond to the erosion potential. The vegetation is not going to be cleared in those areas. It's going to remain largely intact. The root systems will all be left intact. As Mr. Hudson explained, and I commend the city's actions initially for stabilizing these areas. You're right, I wasn't involved at the very early stages. When I got there, some of this work had just been done. And before that, I had even got there, there was a lot of effort put into standard erosion control practices being put in place, albeit a little bit late, that had been done. And those areas have all been vegetated nearly 100% or at least since that time. That level of vegetation will do every bit as good at preventing the kind of erosion that we'd expect to see on a slope like that. There aren't any concentrated flows or anything like that that need to be stabilized, and we're not dealing with bare soil. The additional stability that trees would lend that area, there is an effect there for, to be sure, trees do help stabilize the slope. The majority of the trees are removed, and I do realize that we viewed some trees that looked like they had been ripped out, smaller ones. But most of them remain, the root systems remain in the ground, and in fact, some of them actually had already started to regrow just in the same way they would after a logging operation, for instance. So I think the cover any one of those fairways that you reference is going to be more than adequate even now to prevent any erosion problems, and it's only going to get better as things get more densely vegetated.
So I appreciate that response. I guess I beg to differ in that I think you're right. There is certainly regrowth now, the same kind of regrowth that you would see after a logging operation. The difference I see in these fairways is that with the proposed activity, I mean, we're hoping that we're hoping that a lot of people use this course. We're expecting that. So you're going to have people trampling this vegetation, and I think that will kill the vegetation and thus lead to erosion problems. We had an opportunity to do a site walk at a disc golf course in Manchester and saw a lot of bare soil due to the use of the course. It is just something that happens. And I believe that is going to happen in this case. And so if we're going to build a course, we need to build one that we're going to be proud of in 10 years, not one that we're going to be saying, geez, that was not a good idea to put that on that steep slope. May I continue?
You want to do a follow-up?
I have other, so I think we're done with that part.
Can I just interrupt, because I need clarification on that. I mean, I remember on our site walk that where it was steep, and we were going, can you refresh my memory, were we going to a tee or a basket at that point? And was that 3 or was that 4? Because when I'm looking at C1.1, and I'm looking here, realign trail to avoid steep section of existing trail, and it doesn't seem to align with what I remember. So are there several different places on here where there are slope issues that need to be addressed?
Well, the section of trail realignment is outside but it's secondary really to the whole proposal.
Okay. So where was the steep slope in relation to the tee box and the basket?
I believe the slopes that Commissioner Sarno is referring to are the slopes looking down into the stream across fairways 17, 16, 15, and to some extent 3.
And that's correct, that's what you're referring to?
I'm particularly, 3 is actually the worst one. I was there today just to refresh my memory, and as I noted in the minutes for the site walk, that we specifically talked about the slope on Fairway 3, and I see the reroute of a trail near Fairway 3 and 4, but there's no discussion of Fairway 3. And Fairway 3, when you look at the plan, basically you're going across the stream and then up a very steep slope, and the basket is effectively right on the top of that very steep slope. I think you may have even suggested at the time to put a rope in or something to get up there.
Or I thought we had talked about stairs.
Or
That-
stairs.
it's Something
It's-
okay, yeah, because
Sorry, yeah.
that's what I was remembering, and it was quite steep.
It's
yeah.
quite steep.
And I don't see anything on the plan that addresses that.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't recall discussion of stairs or many specifics in that area. One of the things that maybe happens on these site walks is we kind of break up into little smaller groups, so I might have missed some of that. I guess, the moving of the bridge to between those two is part of this issue, because improvements, to the extent that they're necessary, can be focused in one area. People can be directed to use that area only, rather than finding their own way across the stream and through the wetland. So I believe that's an important part of it. You're correct that all travel paths are not defined on here. But keep in mind that they are not necessarily, or even sometimes specifically not, following the fairway. So in other words, you're going to use that bridge and take a different route up to that basket on Fairway 3 than walking down the steep slope over the stream and then directly up. So I understand the comment. I don't have a direct response on exactly what's going to happen there. Perhaps, like many other sections of the park or any other park, there will need to be something devised trail-wise to make that, the best possible way.
Yeah, I think from what I'm hearing, I mean, I agree with the way the bridge is located, but, and again, we'd have to go back and look at distances, but my recollection is that as soon as you cross the wetlands and then, you head towards the basket on Fairway 3, I mean, that right away you're confronted with, I mean, it's a steep enough slope that if you were going to go, I mean, you would kind of like quasi-crawl up it, because of the steepness. And I mean, if you remember it that way also,
I do,
Commissioner Sarno,
yes.
and I mean, if we're in that right location, I don't think there was a way to go around it. So, I mean, I think, all I'm saying is I think we need to address that in some way, maybe with stairs or something. One, because, I mean, I think originally we just, not only erosion, but I think it was going to be a safety issue. And so I think that we need to come up with some mechanism to get up that slope and hopefully prevent a fair amount of erosion and look at the safety issue of it. Yeah.
I apologize, I don't remember this, I didn't
Yeah.
recall the scope
And,
of
you
that
know,
discussion. Yeah.
This was quite a, I mean, it was a very comprehensive site walk, and so, I mean, it was easy to miss things because there was so much that we were looking at, and we did break up into different groups. Commissioner Sarno, you wanted to continue?
I do, please. My next questions are about out of bounds, and my general question is, how is out of bounds defined for this project?
For that, I think I'd have to defer to someone else on the team. I think my initial feeling is that in the context of what we're doing here, out of bounds is any wetland or wetland buffer where there's not a planned crossing. Other areas, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure if there's a official definition for the game or not. But
We can get clarification on that, but it was my understanding from our discussions that all of the out-of-bound areas would be marked.
Yeah.
And that they would correspond to the buffer for the wetlands, and that one of the stipulations that was requested was that all of the markers be at least 18 inches high,
Yeah.
rather than lying on the ground, so that they don't get obscured and people clearly understand. But my understanding is that will be part of the marking corresponding to course rules and to wetland boundaries.
Yeah, you're correct, and that was something that we identified immediately, a bit late before I tried to make this submittal. I did discuss that with the team, and I think the concern is valid regarding ropes on the ground. So the alternate proposal there is a series of grade stakes which will sit above the ground. They can be painted, they can be maintained, taken down, put back in the seasonally, and a number of them can be used. And of course, they're higher up. Ropes themselves, I think the feeling is that they might be an attractive, something that might become problematic in itself, as far as them being taken down, used for other purposes, just generally, molested. Now, there might be some areas where You know, that a more solid barrier like that might become, you know, necessary. For instance, leading up to a crossing or something. But correct, out of bounds areas, or the proposal is to mark those with highly, you know, visible grade stakes.
Okay, Commissioner Sarno? Yep.
Sure, I just want to clarify what out of bounds actually is. Is out of bounds the limit of the wetland buffer? This is something that was discussed when we walked with the Manchester Hollows course, and we talked about having out of bounds be the limit of the wetland buffer, which would eliminate the details that you have of the fairway within the buffer.
Well, the proposal is to build that. That's the proposal for the project. So the section of fairway that's, you know, shown on the plans is not going to be out of bounds. I suppose, you know, again, this is something that I wasn't a part of discussing, is exactly where that would be. I think that a lot of this relates to how the disc golf is played. So, yeah, is there, I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer to that, I guess.
That's fine.
Now, Mr. Hudson, do you have an answer to that?
I have an answer to that, sure. I'm not a disc golf player, but my understanding is what we're doing, or what we're asking for, that area of the trimming, the pruning of the vegetation is not so that people can go in there and play there. It's to provide a route where a disc can be thrown through that area so that people don't get tangled up in a bush and have to play there. I believe your assessment was correct. Out of bounds will be marked along the buffer, because that's where we're intending people not to play into, with the exception of the places where we actually have to cross. People have to walk and cross at the bridges, but that's not active play. I think it's intended to throw across these areas. Does that answer the question?
Does that answer?
And that'll be marked with the stakes, as was noted, which is certainly, we believe it will be appropriate and is consistent with other courses. And any golf course I ever have played at has stakes to delineate out-of-bounds areas, and it's well understood that that's what that means.
Thank you.
You want to continue?
I do, yes. Stakes are certainly perhaps well understood as out-of-bounds markers, but I think it would be more of a recognizable barrier if we could put something in like a post and rail fence to mark the out-of-bounds area in the fairways. Is that something that you would consider?
Something we could discuss, but speaking personally, I think that may not quite be in keeping with the character of the area. I mean, we're trying to provide this facility and be as respectful of the natural area that it is in. Starting to put up rail fences and that sort of thing starts to become a whole level of structure, which maybe we're not trying to do here. If there were certain areas where we had a big erosion problem and we absolutely had to keep people out of there, then we certainly, that's something we could do as it gets implemented and used, and we, come to understand if there's issues that need to be further addressed. At this point in time, though, I don't think we feel that's necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, I guess what I'd like to do is get to the point where we don't have big erosion problems. So these posts, how closely would they be spaced?
Well, certainly close enough that they would, form a recognizable barrier.
So every
Um,
10 feet?
I think the exact spacing is something that can be discussed. I don't think there's any, 10 feet would seem a little bit close together to me, but, you know, something probably no more than 20 or 30 feet apart.
The fairway is only 10 feet wide, so it would seem 10 feet wouldn't be that unreasonable.
Well, the area where some trimming is proposed in order to allow throwing is 10 feet wide, correct? So really the question is how far on either side do we go? And I think that's up for discussion. If 10 feet is something that the commission feels is a adequate or appropriate spacing, then I don't think that's a problem.
I just would like to interject. I believe in golf, the OBs are line of sight. Okay, so if you have one stake, I mean, because an out-of-bound area is not linear. Okay, I mean, it can be jagged. So, you know, so you have line of sight with one stake, and then the OB, you have the other stake for that line, and then the other stake, you know, might be further away because that line of sight is different in that angle. So I would assume, you know, but again, I think the rules of disc golf may, you know, kind of indicate where, you know, where those are. I don't think it's like every 20 feet, every 50 feet. It depends on the terrain, but that would just be my suggestion. So, I mean, if that, you know, so if that in fact is one of the rules, you know, I think that, you know, the Conservation Commission would probably want to be involved in helping to determine where those markers went in relationship to the wetland boundary. Okay, I mean, I think that would probably, we would want to be collaborative in that area, but it's open right now.
Yeah, and I think it's reasonable to assume that some areas might, because of differences in terrain or the sensitivity of the area, you might want a more narrowly spaced barrier or demarcation of the out-of-bounds area.
Okay, so I'd like to move on to the buffer restoration plans. The new plantings that you will be planting in the 3-gallon buckets, will those be pruned as part of maintenance, and if so, to what height?
No, not initially. I don't think the idea is that those plantings and that portion of the buffer in close proximity to the stream is left to grow without interference. So those grow, you know, without pruning.
So those will never be pruned?
I suppose there's some time in the future when they might get so high. I mean, these shrubs are large shrubs, but they're particularly with the grade, they might not ever need to be pruned.
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to get a sense of, you mentioned a monitoring plan. How do you tell someone to go and prune those if you can't identify how high they should be pruned, at what height they should be pruned?
Well, to clarify, the monitoring I mentioned relates to the construction term monitoring.
Okay.
Just to make sure there's no deviations from what we discuss here and what's on the plans. going forward, there's a maintenance component, just like there is in any park,
Yep.
where a decision is going to have to be made by someone at some point when a particular branch or tree or shrub poses either a safety hazard to the people using the park or various other reasons. Perhaps the trail is just simply blocked by something that needs to be cut. I don't think we can really anticipate all those circumstances at this stage. I do think we probably could reasonably come up with a height, probably somewhere around, breast height, as they would for measuring trees. So that's like 4.5, 5 feet above ground.
Okay.
That's just that's not something we've discussed, the detail on, but I think I'm comfortable enough, offering that there's some room there to come up with if that's what you want to see, a specification, as it were. I think we can work that out.
I would be very comfortable in requesting a specification for this, because otherwise, how do we, maybe you don't monitor, but somebody has to be monitoring the maintenance on this and knowing whether they're doing things according to plan or not. So I think that would be a reasonable thing to have for these shrubs that we'll be planting.
Madam Chair, may I interject?
Mr. Sullivan?
We have several members of the public here, and I don't want to disrupt Commissioner Sarno's line of questioning, but I don't know if folks have constraints on their time this evening that might be attending in the audience, and so I would likely recommend addressing the public comment portion. I don't want to disrupt Commissioner Sarno's line of questioning,
I
but
can continue after.
I wonder if we might give the public an opportunity to speak at this point, based on the hour.
Okay. Okay. Before we go to the public, Commissioner Crook, do you have a question or two?
Yeah. I do have a question, but it feels almost a little silly asking Mr. Quigley to answer some of these questions because he is a wetland scientist.
I'm used to it, don't worry.
Yeah.
Right, and we're used to, we interact with you on a monthly basis almost. And normally what happens is we ask you questions like these, and you and the developer answer them. However, no one from the city is offering you any help here, and you can't answer a lot of our questions. And so I'm curious why that is. And that's part of why
I
it's
think
moving
that
so
I-
Well, if you
slowly.
I'm in the
have no other
position-
question for...
I've answered a number of questions, but I can stand next to them if that's helpful.
It would be really helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
To give you a direct answer, and I would like to, there's a mix of things that I just don't know the answer to, and other things which I can't commit to without discussing with my client, as is always the case. So I've written those down, and those will be things we'll follow up on. But that's a big part of it.
Also, I will say if the person at the podium cannot answer the question, they can also always defer to an expert in the audience that could. So, but at this point, Commissioner Crook, you want to hold off and then, okay. So we'll move it over to the public comment portion of the meeting. So if you would like to come up and make a comment, please come up to the microphone, state your name, your address, and we would appreciate it if you would limit your comments to about 3 minutes. If other people have said what you wanted to say, please come up, introduce yourself, and just mention that it's already been stated and that you're for or against it, and Commissioner Crook is going to be keeping a tally of people's comments. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karen Bill. I live at 95 Parnell Place here in Nashua. Nashua native, lived in Nashua for a good part of my life. I'm having a really hard time understanding why this has not been approved. We have a wetland scientist who has been accepted and used by this committee. He's been in the business for decades. And quite honestly, some of the things that I'm hearing are very troubling to me as a resident. This would be a city park. City parks, like a walking trail, like this actual park now. The first time that I went into this park, because I'm new to disc golf and I just joined the party about a year or so ago, and I was so excited at the opportunity of being out in and with nature, and that Nashua was going to have and present me this opportunity. I've never been able to use Roby Park. I don't have small kids, I don't sled, I don't go watch the ball games, and often I thought, wow, what an unused piece of property this is for a lot of people in town. So when I heard about the disc golf after going to play disc golf, I was thrilled. And when I tell you that the out of bounds are clearly marked, and you have a team of people that you're playing with, everybody understands the out of bounds. It's not like, oh, where are the out of bounds? This isn't the Twilight Zone out of bounds. This is clearly marked every course I've been to. It's not rocket science. It's easily and clearly marked. You know, you say, oh, there's going to be bare ground. Go to any walking trail in Nashua. If it's being used, there's bare ground. This is going to be a utilized course because hundreds and hundreds of people want it. Rotary has signed up to be paying for this. As a former member of Rotary, the other club in Nashua, I was so excited to hear that because I know that Rotary itself is lending itself and doing due diligence to projects that they support. And they have to be community-minded and based. And, by the way, they're going to be upkept by DPW, and I'm sorry, I took quite offense when you said, you know, you don't have the answer and nobody from the city is saying anything. This gentleman works for the city. Alex has been at this podium many times and works for the city. And, again, I don't see why this hasn't been approved. It feels to me, and I'm speaking for me as a citizen, so I don't want any grudges to be held. But it feels just a tad political. And when I walked in that area myself last year to see the disc golf area, the new course, there's boards in there. I'm like, who put the boards here? Oh, that would be people who have been using the course, the area for years, not supposed to be there. And I said, oh, there's the stream. It's coming down from the right. And then when I walked with Alex, he said, oh, no, that's runoff from retail in Sky Meadow. The stream is over here to the left behind the rock wall.
Miss Bill, you're at about 3:30, just so you know.
Thank you. I'll just close with my thought, and thank you for that. I want to play in my town. I know you're here to serve the wetlands and the community, but, and if one mistake was made, I feel like nobody's letting it go. And the politics be damned, they shouldn't be in this room. It's not what we're about. And they're bending over backwards and will continue to do so. So will you just, you know, work with us? Because when we did the site walk, nobody was working with each other. It was like groups not sharing any information. So again, thank you for allowing me. Thank you so much for giving me an extra minute. And I hope you do the right thing. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sharon Lockwood. I live at 398 East
Can you
Dunstable
speak
Road.
up, please?
Is that better? 398 East Dunstable Road. I've been to several of these meetings. I think if anything is to be done in this area, there would be more people in the city served if it was just walking trails and not disc golf. One issue that has been brought up before, but I'm going to bring up again, is the parking issue. And I feel like things are being done backwards. If there's a disc golf course and no parking, I think it's a safety issue. And I'm curious why this hasn't been brought more to the attention of the general public. I haven't seen anything in any newspapers or on MUR. And I wonder if the people at Sky Meadow are even aware that in their neighborhood there's going to be a proposed disc golf course. So, thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak?
Luke Mertens, 3 Georgetown Drive, Nashua, New Hampshire. If you don't know where that is, it's abutting Sky Meadow, which has a big fence around it to keep people out. If I could walk through the fence, I guess I'd be in the trails here in a matter of minutes. I think this has been really interesting. As a relatively new citizen of Nashua, formerly in Merrimack, I've been a little bit frustrated since moving here with the lack of outdoor recreative spaces that we do have. There are some that I've really enjoyed. I think the Yudicki Trail system just down the road is well managed and is actually very close and offers a more comprehensive and valuable walking system for pure recreation in that format. I guess I had a similar thought to what was mentioned earlier, which is that I've always seen this parcel of land. I grew up in Hudson, just across the river, as kind of unused. And having gone and walked around there since I moved here, hearing about the disc golf course, it surprised me that the issue, I guess, at hand was a staunch desire to conserve it as it stands today. Don't necessarily think this is a very impressive parcel of land, nor that the infrastructure that it's currently set up with has been well thought out or maintained. I mean, I don't want to besmirch the good name of the children, but I think I understand over a decade ago it was put together by some middle schoolers, the direction of a teacher, and I don't believe they went through anywhere near rigorous processes we're going through here today. I do recognize and appreciate the duty of this committee is to support the conservation of wetlands, and appreciate that you allocate and spend your time and have clearly thought about this a lot. I would, I guess, temper the comment there to say that I don't believe this falls under the category of the major wetlands or the critical wetlands. I think we're kind of getting into a much lower level threshold here. And I think that there does change the boundaries in terms of the legal requirements. I would, I guess, as an uninformed citizen, imagine that it might also color the complexion of how stringent we are in allowing for an area to be utilized by the public in a positive way. I think that this would be very valuable overall to the city of Nashua and an improvement over how the space is being currently utilized. I guess I'll close by saying the last thing, obviously I support developing the course. I do play, but I haven't been playing very long. One thing I've found is it is a rather inclusive sport in multiple levels. It's inclusive financially, it's low cost. It's a little bit of a juxtaposition with the Sky Meadow property next door, which is exclusive. I'm not poor to do financially, but I can't utilize that space as a resident because I'm blocked off to it. That is a huge swath of land. The other piece of it is financially, physically, and really like age as well. I think you see that people are utilizing disc golf spaces, come from all kinds of backgrounds, different ages, and they're doing so to utilize the space and recreate outdoors in a positive way. And I think that's something that probably this committee would share as a sentiment, is a desire to be utilizing our natural spaces in a way that's harmonious. I think that you mentioned earlier there was some concerns when you went to the Hollows course. I have been to a number of courses, and I don't necessarily think that's the best example unless you're trying to show how not to do it from the ground up in a wetlands environment.
You're at about 4 minutes.
Okay, well,
Yeah, so-
I'll just close by saying thank you for your time, and hopefully this can maybe be a little bit more of a holistic discussion and analysis going forward than so much in the weeds, because I think at the crux of it, that's really what it does come down to. Is this going to move forward or not? And I think it would be really valuable and positive for Nashua and the community if it did. So, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Christina McKinley, 6 Southgate Drive. Appreciate the opportunity. I already distributed to your group a collection of photographs, and I had hoped Lisa Buteau, I don't know that that I can give you a digital copy. That seems reasonable because these are photographs that indicate what I see as ongoing maintenance issues that if this project goes forward, and I certainly hope it does not, but if it does, the Department of Public Works has been responsible for decades, as I understand it, for the maintenance of the park, and what I am able to show evidence of is there has been clearly a lack of interest, lack of maybe capabilities, as evidenced by all the dead trees, the hanging limbs, the climbing vines, trash, all of it, much of which is easily at this point accessible from East Dunstable Road in their trucks. The park between the upper parking lot and the playground, that little wooded area I took pictures of as well, and is equally mismanaged, ignored. So at the very least, I certainly think that there ought to be consideration for someone other than the Department of Public Works to be involved if this project goes forward. The engineer made a comment. He doesn't know how often there might be need for equipment or things to manage fallen trees and limbs and safety issues. And as an abutter, I can tell you that can happen after every single storm. We manage 23 acres of trails and choose not to let them look like what is accessible off of East Dunstable Drive that the park manages. So my concern, again, is who is going to handle this, and how is there a budget, given that what I've understood is we're already short on money to manage what we have. So we're adding something else that I see as a high-intensity maintenance issue, and it will become more difficult than managing the space between the upper parking lot and the playground or along the park's East Dunstable abutting, because it's acres of walking around. I don't know who's going to do that, but it obviously needs to be planned for and budgeted for. I did not attend the meeting after the site visit in Manchester, but I'm happy to hear at least some of the issues were mentioned here about the understory and bare ground and all the rest of it. One thing that was not mentioned that I was called out upon at one of the meetings here that was noted from your visit in Manchester was tree damage from discs that, throwing. So I'd like to make a note here that I don't know whether the disc golfers were purposefully misrepresenting that, or whether they just don't know their game well enough, not sure. Either way, that comment that that is not part of the game was obviously disingenuous. Both the Department of Public Works and all of you received videos of competitions where that was being done, and you saw the damage yourself
Ms. McKinley, you're about 4 minutes, just so you know.
from that. And finally, I did happen to have the opportunity to attend a commission meeting for private property owners. And all I would say is, it's alarming to me that 3 private property owners who wanted to take down 7 trees in total of 3 properties that affect 5 people, the residents, there were tremendously restrictive and specific requirements for those private property owners. Why have the Department of Public Works been allowed to, and it was sort of agreed by the GOV person that there were mistakes made. If a person who's a private property owner has to do very specific maintenance to correct a mistake, why in the world do we let our city workers do something less than that? And it's very clear that we are preparing to do that. They had no permits, they cut down hundreds of trees, and they ignored
Chair.
everything about what was should have been
Ms.
prepared
McKinley,
for.
It's inappropriate to disrespect anybody here and any of our public workers. I think everybody has owned up to the fact that mistakes were made, okay? We have, I can tell you, the Conservation Commission deals with code violations all the time from people who take down tens of trees illegally, and then they come to us for mitigation, okay? It happens. It happens with private property owners. It happens with the city, okay? And we expect all property owners, whether it's the city or private property owners, if they're going to take down a tree in a wetland buffer, that they complete an application. And I think, that's, that has happened here. We did have an application. So I just wanted to clarify that.
14 feet height with special jagged.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is there anybody else that wants to speak?
My name is James Gratian, and I live at 10B French Street currently, though I spent most of my life at 233 Broad Street in Nashua as well. A couple of things I wanted to speak about have already been said, so as requested, I'll comment on that. I know there was a comment made about parking. I just wanted to say I disagreed that ample parking wasn't there. I believe there are parking at the top of the sled hill, over by the kids' playground, and overflow parking across the street in the plazas that would end up being available for this. So I was very confused at that point that was made. Another one that was made is, well, I guess, I know this really isn't an opinion forum on whether people want this to go happen or not. It's about protecting the land there, right? So for the record, I am for the project going forward, though I think I speak for a lot of the disc golf community that I would like this to be done in a way that's respectful to the land, make sure that the Conservation Committee does their job, and, we want to be impacting the land in a proper way. So, one thing I was shown by someone from the community was that they, had done a walkthrough of the proposed land, and they were showing me some of the trash that they were taking out of there that had been kind of just sitting around for, I think they looked like a soda can from like the 1950s that was still just sitting in there. So, and other items that are just like very old trash in this land. I've been using the parks, Mines Falls, Utica, Lovely Trails, Lovely Parks for many years. I grew up here, used it a lot as a teenager. I've used it a lot as an adult with my kids. I did not even know that those that this proposed area of land had walking trails or anything in it, that it was like a park available for people to wander into and explore the entire time I've grown up here in the city. So I saw it as so I would agree with the previously made comment that it seems like an underused piece of land. And I think that if this project were to go forward, I think that the increased people in there, there would be an impact, of course, with people using it when it wasn't previously used, but I do think that there would be a lot of people going through and, picking up any trash found in there, volunteering, whether it's like Boy Scout clubs or 4-H or anything like that, would be invited to do projects towards this. And I know I'm approaching my 3 minutes, so I don't want to go over like other people. I'm going to just wrap up with saying thank you for your commitment to making sure the right thing is done. And I know everyone wants to be a part of, well, not everyone, I don't speak for everyone here, but I know a lot of people want to be a part of some form of a proposal that we can go forward with. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I appreciate Matt being cognizant of, people's time tonight, whether they have to go home early or what.
Can you just lower the?
Sorry, Denise Musioli, 6 Midhurst. I appreciate Matt's suggestion that we move the public comments to this period. However, I disagree. I would like to hear the remaining of the commissioners' comments, and I think that we have a right to do so, and we should have that choice. If people have to go home, they can certainly go home. I would like to maintain give my comments after the commissioners are done. Respectfully, I'm asking that you allow me to do that. Is that allowed? I mean, the agenda says public comments after discussion. We would like to hear I certainly would like to hear Commissioner Sano. I think she had more to say.
No, I believe.
Or was she done?
Yeah, I believe at this point, we're going to have the public comment, okay, and I would like you to make your comments now, because then what will happen is we will discuss it, make a motion, and discuss where we stand on that motion, and then we'll take a vote. And so your public comments after the vote wouldn't, affect it.
But I don't know what she has to add. I may want to make a comment on anything that these other people want to say, and I am going to ask that you follow the agenda. I'm not trying to be rude. Respectfully speaking, I would like that the agenda be followed, and be given a chance to hear out the remaining commissioners. And I will be brief. I have a prepared statement.
Yeah, I'm going to respectfully decline that.
Okay.
So you can speak now,
Okay,
if you
I'll
wish.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
That doesn't count to the 3 minutes, right? So I was asking you a question. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, so I already gave you my note. Just so that we are crystal clear, the proposed disc golf course at Roby is being ultimately groomed for professional tournaments that will host quite possibly up to 450 players, plus spectators and vendors, which will significantly increase impact to the wildlife habitat and wetlands. These wetlands have been deemed by Brendan, I think, as has been recorded as being critical and prime. The state of New Hampshire has identified an emergent wetland, which takes special state control. Let's see. Yes, we made mistakes. I'm not going to go into that, but mistakes were made. The designer of this course, which we've paid $5,000 to, that came out of city funds, he's a professional course designer. And one of the statements he made was that he wants to, he hopes that there's going to be tournaments here. So the amount of trash that I see after softball games, close to the wetlands, because there's a wetlands down by, there's a hill where the parking area is. The amount of trash I see, and I've called DPW a number of times, this high, over the barrel. And they have put extra barrels, so I thank them for that. Now here we're talking about stakes, okay? we have a lot of wildlife back there, and you're going to put up these stakes. I can guarantee you that they're going to be pulled up and used by children, teenagers, to create damage. Guaranteed. If you use rope and netting, that type of fencing, animals are going to get caught in it, and they're going to suffer. They're going to suffer out there, just like the soccer nets, things like that. So you have to be very careful about the fencing. I like the idea, actually, of the split rail fencing, if this is to go forward. We must all be stewards of natural resources, and we are specifically fighting for one of the last premier wildlife habitats in the city, which includes critical and prime wetlands. Any decision made at Roby will affect neighboring conservation land in Dunstable. We have Harris Brook that runs into Salmon Brook, that runs into the Merrimack River, that goes down to Dunstable, that goes down to Groton. These are pristine wetlands. I almost wanted to take a drink of water from the stream. That's how clean that stream is. You start letting in tournaments, that stream is going to go to trash. And unlike the opinion of the Director of Public Works, this will not be just another free family activity to get people outside and exercising. For example, people can walk dogs at shelters. Gives them exercise, gives them a sense of purpose, teaches them how to handle dogs, free, family. I say that's a win-win. You couldn't have picked a worse place to put a disc golf course. It was originally suggested to be at Greeley Park by the boat dock. I probably wouldn't oppose that. I probably would not oppose that, because a lot of that area in there is already developed. Here's some of the rules for the town of Pelham. The town of Pelham is not responsible at the disc golf for returning discs from the water and woods can be dangerous. Retrieve at your own risk. It doesn't say don't go in the wetlands. It says be careful because we don't want to get sued. This is from the Pelham disc golf course rules. So, government and industry has a duty to prevent harm when there is credible evidence that harm is occurring or is likely to occur, even when the exact nature and full magnitude of harm is not yet proven. Harm has occurred. We have a written violation report. It's occurred. And I think that's it. So, but I do want to thank you folks for going through the efforts. I would say that I really do not want it to be passed, but sadly if it is, you really need to think about how are you going to feel 10 years from now? Are you going to say, yay, that's what I voted for? Are you going to go, oh my God, I can't believe I voted for that? That's my opinion. I do want to thank you for your time. I know how many hours you spent out there in August walking that hot trail that I barely made myself, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Richard Smart, 159 Searles Road. Quite honestly, I'm really tired of getting up in front of this group. It's been a long, long path to get here. I'm just going to read a couple of things that we've talked about over these past few months. You've heard from Mr. Quigley that there is no impact to the wetlands or buffer. The impact that did occur has been remediated. In fact, most of it occurred as a natural recovery. He presented a plan with you and the city that shows exactly how to proceed with no further impact. I'm going to read you a quote from Commissioner Dutsey. I want to assure you that the Conservation Commission's only concern in the matter of the disc golf course relates to maintaining the integrity of the wetlands. To that end, we have asked DPW for a plan regarding the design, construction, and future maintenance of the course as they pertain to the wetlands. We recently provided them with guidance on what the Commission needs. We've discussed at length the purpose of the Conservation Commission. Roby Park is under the operation of the Parks and Recreation Department, under the guidance of the Director of Public Works, at the direction of the Board of Public Works. This park should be handled like any other park in the city, except where the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction. Why are you applying different rules and stricter rules for disc golfers? This property has been used for 30 years without any concern. All of a sudden, Commissioner Sarno, you have these wild concerns about what is going to happen back there.
I'm sorry, Mr. Smart. I'll have to ask you to not continue along that line. We don't want to cast aspersions on anybody in this room. I mean, you can continue, please, but.
Sure thing.
Don't make it personal to any,
I'm just referencing
okay.
a statement that was made.
A statement, okay.
Okay. Another quote from Ms. Dutsey. We both have the same goals, namely getting people outdoors while protecting wildlife and the environment as much as possible. I am hopeful we can come up with a workable plan. We have talked in much detail about disc golf, the camaraderie, the exercise, the ability to be alone or with others in the woods, the aspects that saved my life, the energy it will bring the youth of Nashua. Ms. Dutsey, you told me that regardless of what was said on social media, it is the intent of the Conservation Commission to render an impartial decision based on existing science. So please, vote with your scientist hat on. Remember, this is not about whether you agree with how this project was handled. You have a very specific and strict jurisdiction within this park property. Mr. Quigley has been rather blunt with me when I ask him repeatedly about this project and its impact to wetlands. I myself, as a scientist, want to know, is this impactful? He has been emphatically and blunt with me over and over again. I just don't see it. I don't see the impact. Please follow the science presented here this evening and provide a positive recommendation for the continuance of this project. Thank you for your time and good evening.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Hello, I'm Brian Chamberlain, 8 Althea Lane. Dr. Smart has pretty much covered everything that I was going to say. I will say that I run the leagues at Pelham. I help run the league in Manchester. If I ask any disc golfer to come out and help me pick up trash, they'll be there in 10 minutes. There won't be an issue with trash. Any brush that's on the ground will be picked up, but where it needs to be, any concerns about the other 23 abutting acres that take a ton of time to manage, I don't understand that because I can get 40 people out there and get stuff done in a weekend for free, no budget required. So, thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, anybody else?
I just have a question. Can I ask one question?
I will allow one question. Is it short? It has to be short.
A lot has been made of whether the space had been used prior. And I just wonder, the question for me is, if any effort had gone into the walking trails, do you think we would have more people utilizing them? So we're about to put a lot of effort into something that is another league kind of sport. They're talking about it. And my question is, why is the only thing we're interested in something that you have to be with a group to enjoy?
Okay, thank you for your question. I'm not sure that the Conservation Commission can answer that because, again, it's not conservation land. And I neglected to state this in the beginning, but basically, you know, we get two different types of issues that come to us. One is an application for something to happen, and we look at that. And the other is a code violation when something has already happened, and now we're being asked to mitigate it. And this was the latter. It was a code violation, and so that's what we're dealing with. So all of those other tangent, you know, I guess the question could be answered if the community felt that walking trails in Roby Park were of utmost interest. Why didn't those citizens come forward and request from DPW, and we do have commissioners of DPW, or request from the Conservation Commission that trails be made? So you can, you know, I mean, in this case, we had a group of people who came forward and wanted something developed, but any citizen in this city could have come forward with any idea to the commissioners of the Department of Public Works and asked that the land be used in that way. So, I mean, that's what happened. Is there anybody else here who would like to make any comments?
Matty Cooming, longtime New Hampshire native. I'm definitely for this project. I back my fellow disc golfers on this. Disc golf saved my life, and I feel like that it could impact a lot of the youth in the city, and they'll have a place to go out and enjoy nature as well. We have one heck of a community behind us, and a lot of us take a lot of pride in our courses throughout the state. And I think this is what the youth needs to get off their tablets and get out there in the woods and enjoy it. And I really am for this project.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Abadili, 6 Bell Avenue. We'll go ahead and start my own timer here. I won't use all that time at all. With that said, obviously there's been a lot of discussion today. A lot of it I do agree with as far as how the community treats the trail systems. Community cleanup days are a common element of the disc golf community. Sometimes you'll see them even integrated into a disc golf league night. There was a comment about this being a league sport or group activity. Yes, that is true. However, there have been plenty of times where after work, I've just gone for a solo round to walk through the woods, play the sport, get my mind off of the world, and that is also an adequate use of the space. Regarding using trail systems in Nashua, there are many uses which I agree with, as was just said. Engaging the youth of the city in this sport, which has a very low cost of entry, thank you, is something that has been supported by other groups in the region and even across the country, such as the Edge Charitable Disc Golf Foundation. They have a focus on engaging youth in this sport. Regarding the city at large, my mother was actually a school nurse in the area for a long time and a huge proponent of public health. She helped bring healthy lunches to the schools, which is an aside, but combining that with an activity such as this, something that can be integrated with a phys ed program or extracurriculars for students, is something that I think should have immense support. Regarding the impact of the wetlands, I understand how things have gone down in the past. We've discussed this ad nauseum. I won't add on to that. However, I will say the community itself takes great pride in maintaining those wetlands, in maintaining the area around them, and making sure that we are impacting nature only in a positive way. Kind of a Scouts code type of thing. I thank you all for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Alex McLean. I just wanted to touch note on some of the league issues that have been brought up. I myself have not been a part of any league since 2019, 2018. My family's not part of a league. We play on our own. That is our thing. And it is a thing for a lot of people. Yes, there are people that are part of leagues. That does not necessarily speak for everyone. So as much as we think that you need to be a part of something to go out and enjoy this, you do not. So I just wanted to touch on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, oops, yep, sir. Understood. Ms. Musioli, you're going to be reading this because the gentleman has a speech issue.
Yes. This is Thomas.
Yeah, bring the...
Tom O'Brien.
Okay, thank you.
So can I start reading it now? So, Good evening, Commissioners. I respectfully request that public comments made by non-Nashua residents be disregarded because they don't hold a vote, pay taxes, and will not be affected by any liability or environmental lawsuits that may arise from construction or operation of a disc golf course at Roby. Why are we here tonight? Because the Director of Public Works thinks that a petition with 200 signatures, which aren't likely to be all from Nashua residents, is enough support to destroy a prime wildlife habitat, which includes critical and prime wetlands. 200 signatures of the 92,000 residents of the city of Nashua. 200. After the cutting stopped, there was ugliness where once a beautiful forest with a good underbrush story. They already discussed that. And a meandering brook is. We spotted less wildlife immediately. Might I suggest a family-friendly free activity that is a bit less destructive? How about forest immersion? It's a technique used by mental health experts, involves exercise in the fresh air. Some time ago, from the first time we have seen the obscene spray painting began on trees. Here's a picture. Is it in here? This one's not obscene because it's been modified for PG-13.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody spray painted it with gold, and someone came by and said, I don't want my child seeing that, and I don't blame them. And then somebody completely blacked it out.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. So how long before those proposed bridges and signs become a haven for taggers so families can't even bring their kids out there with the obscenities? In this I guess if the city and Rotary Club wants to waste their money, it's a great idea. Just think how that money could be used to beautify Roby Park with minimal environmental impact. The Conservation Commission's purpose is for the proper utilization and protection of natural and watershed resources. This is just a duplicate, people already said that. But there's apex predators there, bear, coyote, fisher, bobcat. A lot of people, I'm sorry, I'm starting my opinion. You must not only consider the wetlands, but all the natural resources of Roby Park. The Commission is tasked with the protection, development, or better utilization of such areas. Approving a professional 18-hole disc golf course through approximately 49 acres of prime wildlife habitat and critical wetlands is not better utilization, nor is it the path of least impact. I respectfully ask the Commission to deny the city's proposal in full without concessions and to do what is right for the residents of the city and the forest that is treasured by so many. Designated Roby Forest as a permanent conservation land for generations to come, long after disc golf baskets are rusted and deserted, is the right thing to do. Thank you for your immense time you have put into the project. Hope you do the right thing and end it now. Did you want to say about that? Do we have time?
5 seconds.
Oh. When we approach the Hollows disc golf course, do you want to, I mean, it's not even written out. Okay, never mind.
Okay. All set?
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Okay, is it Dr. Smart?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Smart, okay. So,
I'm just curious if I could respond to the comment about the petition. They said we have 612 signatures, all natural residents, and if anybody would like to inspect the petition,
okay.
I'd like to make that available.
Thank you. Okay, if there's nobody else that will be speaking, I guess the question is, do the commissioners have enough information on which to vote? Do you feel we have enough information on which to vote? Commissioner Sarno?
I still have my questions.
Will any of those, the answers to those questions, change your vote, do you think? Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, so you know, if we feel we have enough information to vote, the next step would be to make a motion. Hopefully somebody will second that motion, and then we will have discussion on that, and then we will take a vote. Okay? So Commissioner Sarno, do you feel you have enough information at this point?
Yes.
Okay, and if we want to add any stipulations? Yep, Mr. Sullivan?
Madam Chair, I'm wishing only to offer a few comments when the time is appropriate, whether that's now or subsequent to the discussion that you're having, but my comments are both objective and subjective at some level as well. So whenever you feel that's appropriate, I'd like to make a few comments.
Let me think about that. How about, I would like to make the motion and then have your comments prior to the vote.
I think it might be best if I make comments now, because I think some of my comments border on the line of advocacy, quite frankly, and so I'd like
Mr.
to-
Sullivan, do you want to make some comments now?
Please. Thank you.
Okay, you have the floor.
You ever ask someone for, yeah, no, I appreciate that, and thank you, commissioners, and for the members of the public that are here, and the commissioners, and everybody that's been involved. This has been a long and arduous process, and I'm going to exceed my own 3-minute timeline here, to be fair, because luckily tonight I got to staff the commission as Deb Chisholm was unable to join us, and so you'll have to listen to me for a few minutes. But this has been a long, arduous process. I've been involved since the beginning. I remember talking to Commissioner Crook when initially issues were identified in Roby Park, and immediately having a conversation with Director Photo just hours or minutes, or I'm not sure exactly how long after, about what the next steps were going to be to address some concerns that had been brought forward. And so perhaps that's the first thing I'd like to comment on. I know there's been some concern this evening relative to the ownership, if you will, of the city of the application that's in front of it, and the ability to answer questions that have come up as part of the discussion this evening. And I think I have a few thoughts on that, one of which I think some of these are operational questions that I don't need to tell this group are outside of the purview of your review, but the answers are simply not known. And so I think that the city is a bit hesitant to commit, make solid commitments to specific operational items this evening when it simply does not know how the park will operate in all regards moving forward. Now, I do think there are some environmental commitments that can be made, whether that's sort of the breast height of trimming or other very objective things. I think those commitments can be made, but disc golfers will use the park in the way that the park design sort of encourages them to, and so I think some of the operational questions we simply don't have the answers to tonight, but we can certainly work on getting those. But I do want to comment on, Mr. Quigley's participation in this process, and the reason why city staff have stood behind Mr. Quigley for many of the questions that have been asked is that, frankly, one of the first directives that we got in responding to some of the concerns about the work that was done was that we needed to secure a professional consultant to help aid us in developing a plan for any potential use of the property, whether that be an 18-hole disc golf, whether that be restoration or the like. And so we've relied heavily on Mr. Quigley's expertise, and so if you hear us standing behind him a bit, it's for that reason. We've listened to you, we know what the regulations say, and we know that the regulations rely heavily on us having that expert before you this evening. And so we're certainly happy to offer answers, but we have a qualified professional that will help us do that. So I just wanted to quickly say that we, as a city, I think, have a real ownership of this application. Director Photo, Engineer Hudson, and others have been intimately involved to a fault where they've taken on a level of responsibility when there were potential violations or violations that took place. They've stepped forward and accepted the responsibility of that, but they've always been an active participant in what's come before this commission. I wanted to quickly comment on and remind everyone that the application before you this evening is, obviously you're a recommending authority. I don't need to talk about that. You're very familiar with the process, but your review power comes out of a provision of the ordinance that is what we refer to as a special exception. A special exception under New Hampshire state law is a zoning allowance that specifically is a permitted use, a use that is permitted under the ordinance subject to special conditions. So we're not talking about, for those that are familiar with land use, we're not talking about a variance, we're not talking about a waiver where an applicant has to demonstrate hardship. We're talking about something that shall be granted in the event that certain conditions are met. Now, to the commission's authority, the commission has clear standards about what those special exception criteria are. And in fact, in the case of a wetland, there are more criteria, and you typically review those as part of your deliberation of an application. Is there appropriate mitigation? Could the use otherwise be located? What are the impact parameters? Those are all things that you look at, and those are above and beyond what a traditional special exception is. But again, assuming that those are met, This commission's recommendation is whether or not the criteria have been met. That then goes to the ZBA, and the ZBA can decide only whether or not that permitted use may move forward based on the conditions. And so I want to just be clear that this is not, although the term exception is used in the definition, this is in fact not an exception. It's a permitted use under the ordinance to go into the wetlands buffer, provided that certain conditions are met. So the test before you this evening is, have those conditions been met? I think that's what you're all working very hard to determine, but this is not a variance. This is a different process that's before you. I won't read, purpose language or anything of that sort, but I went back to the ordinance a bit tonight. I've been looking at this application a lot over the last months, and I don't need to tell you that the ordinance is very clear that the reason these regulations exist is that there's an interest in protecting critical wetland habitats. I don't mean that in the ordinance definition, but wetland habitats and buffer habitats and the impacts there too. But there again, while there's an interest in protecting, there's a clear and explicit ability of the Zoning Board of Adjustment through a special exception process to essentially allow uses as a permitted use within those wetland buffer areas, provided that certain criteria are met. The city does not have the authority to allow certain activity within sort of dug wetlands themselves. That's a different issue for another time, but I mean only to say that you have authority to allow for permitted uses in certain circumstances. There's been a lot of discussion, perhaps not tonight, but at prior meetings, about sort of the precedent-setting nature of the decision that's in front of the commission this evening. A couple comments on that. Your decisions aren't precedent-setting in the sense that you always reserve the right in your interpretation of the criteria to change the way that you apply those criteria. There's no question about that. And so if there's any concern that a decision here in either direction may spell a problematic situation for a future application, that's not the case. Could it be weaponized? Certainly, but you're in no way bound to make decisions based on precedent applications. But I'd note that this commission hears on a nearly monthly basis applications for special exceptions for wetland buffer impacts or direct wetland impacts that involve development, real development activities, structures, parking lots, significant encroachments that are permanent in nature into the wetland buffer. And while I can't emphasize this enough, you're very diligent in your review of those, but in many cases, an applicant is able to provide a solution or a mitigation strategy that you ultimately feel comfortable with. And so those are often with much more intense use proposals than what you have before you this evening, in my opinion, here in this being the subjective part. I believe that permanent development, whether of a structure or of a parking lot, has a longer term impact within the wetland buffer than some of the uses that are being proposed here this evening. And to that point, the ordinance is interesting in that it really talks about development within the wetland buffer. We've interpreted that over time to mean any disturbance, and that's why certain activities before you are subject to your approval, I think. But what the ordinance doesn't speak to, that's been discussed a lot tonight, in fact, is what I would call intermittent use within the wetland buffer. This is kids running through a wet meadow. This is walking off the trail into a wet area. The ordinance does not prohibit that. In fact, it doesn't give the zoning board nor the Conservation Commission any authority when it comes to sort of that intermittent impact. Relative to sort of permanent treading on land and the long-term impacts of that, I think that's a bit gray in a sense, but I just want to be clear that when we're talking about things like out of bounds and how players may traverse the property, we can't control that activity. And so I would urge you to sort of put that aside when you consider the application before you this evening. Out of bounds is important to Commissioner Sarno's comments in that, is the buffer going to be that boundary? I think that's important to know. I think that was a very good question. I think that's something that should be stipulated should the board or the commission choose to move in favor of an approval. But the bottom line is that intermittent activity will not be stopped. It hasn't been stopped on this property for a long, long time. There's an incredible network of trails out here, but that hasn't stopped folks from going off the beaten path, and I expect the same will be true of the disc golf community. And yes, perhaps on a more frequent basis based on the increased usage of the property, but we simply cannot prevent that, and I don't think that's something the commission wants to do either unless there's significant degradation to the well. I think that's your inherent concern. By the way, when I wrote this out, it was about 3 minutes, so I made a huge mistake somewhere here. But I did just want to touch on a few points, and I think these are important, and as I get going, I can't stop myself. But I mentioned that this isn't a binding action on any future commission, applications or consideration of anything. But again, I want to emphasize the fact, and perhaps I am doing a bit of lobbying here, that I've been very impressed working with the commission over the last years in your ability to take proposals that, frankly, I wasn't sure could be accommodated under the wetlands buffer rules, and to find a way to productively and successfully work with applicants to identify mitigation strategies that, frankly, make both groups feel comfortable. I don't know that you're going to do that with this application. I respect that, and that's not, I'm not lobbying you to find that solution here, but I would argue that the city has made its very best effort to try and, yes, propose an 18-hole course. There's no question about that. But within a sensitive environmental area. And so I think the product you see before you, whether it's ultimately acceptable to you or not, I think the Department of Public Works and those involved have tried to apply the general tenets of the wetlands rules when designing this course. Whether they've done so successfully, you're going to make that decision in just a few minutes, but based on my experience with that group, I think they've made a tremendous stride in that regard. And then I'll quickly close by saying something that I think needs to be said. There's a lot of conversation on both sides about disc golf itself, and thank you everyone, whether you like disc golf or you don't. I respect your opinions on that. They don't matter in the context of what this group is deciding this evening. It's wonderful that it's been transformative for a lot of you, and I know that's wonderful, and this is an incredible economic development opportunity. But this group, they need to do what they need to do, and so I'll turn to you again to say, this is a wetlands application. You know where your boundaries lie. I think we appreciate everyone's testimony, but it may not be applicable to the decision that you make directly this evening. But I do think this is a critical project to the city of Nashua, and that's why we've been here for 2 years trying to advocate for at least some level of approval, recognizing that that's been a bit challenging. And then just finally, I would thank you for the time allowing me to speak. I know it's a bit unusual for me to offer comments, but I think what is common is for me to offer or try to get some level of compromise on any application in front of this body, so I don't think this is breaking any rules of the past that we've implemented, but happy to answer any questions, particularly around the wetlands rules and how they should be applied here and what those criteria are, but I'm looking forward to assisting you in making a decision in a few minutes. And ultimately, I believe, likely accompanying this application to the zoning board, regardless of this commission's recommendation, because I think this is of that level of criticality where I do believe the DPW intends to bring it forward to that level at some point in time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Before we move on to a motion, do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Sullivan in terms of clarification? I think it was quite clear. Okay. So at this point, I would like to make the following motion. I move to approve the disc golf course in Roby Park with the following stipulations, and please bear with me because they are numerous. The first stipulation would be that the Nashua Conservation Commission will conduct a course monitoring visit annually and report its findings and action items to the Conservation Commission and the Department of Public Works. The second stipulation would be that wetland boundary markers will be at least 18 inches high for easy identification. The third stipulation, and this relates to a letter that was sent by GOV Environmental that lists a lot of things in here, but that invasive species management, construction practices, and post-construction best management practices will follow the guidelines outlined in the May 19th, 2023 letter from GOV Environmental Services entitled Invasive Species Management and Operation and Maintenance Plan, as it refers to Roby Park, proposed disc golf course, Spitbrook Road, Nashua, New Hampshire. And I can give copies to anybody if you want, but it's pretty detailed and references New Hampshire DOT best management practices for those issues. The fourth stipulation would be the monitoring of the construction phase by members of the Conservation Commission. Let's see, and the Conservation Commission would be consulted regarding wetland buffer stakes. The next stipulation would be that there would be a specification for plant height, at which point pruning is necessitated. So we would work on that. And I believe that's all the stipulations that I have. Does anybody else have any other stipulations that they would want to put in? Okay, seeing none, do I have a second for that motion? Are you seconding it? No. You wanted to add a stipulation?
I did.
Okay.
Is there a maintenance plan? Will there be a maintenance plan?
Good point. That, can you word that you want a maintenance plan presented to the Conservation Commission prior to the completion of construction? Okay, that would be another stipulation. Any other stipulations?
Madam Chairwoman.
Commissioner Parati?
Just getting back to the first question for Mr. Quigley, if possible, I would like to see the plants increased in size. So for the 25 viburnums that were spec'd, up that to 3-gallon pot size, 24 to 36 inches. And for the clethra, up that to 3 gallons as well, 24 to 36 inches, quantity of 25. And then for the high bush blueberry, probably keep that at 1 gallon, 18 to 24 inches, but increase the quantity somewhere 30 to 50 total plants, blueberries, as Mr. Quigley sees fit.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we'll add that as a stipulation. Commissioner Sarno?
So to add to those plantings, I would like to see low bush blueberry and Virginia creeper, a couple of more or less ground covers be added.
Okay, we had the stipulation for more high bush blueberries from Commissioner Parati, but this is
This is separate.
Okay, this is in a different area?
This is in the same area, but these are the native plants that they will be installing in the restored areas. I would like to add low bush blueberry and Virginia creeper to the list.
Okay.
And Madam Chair,
And
I
that's it? Yes,
just
yes.
might suggest that it reminds me of the middle school project. Perhaps if this is incorporated in a motion, we could return to you at a later time once we get through the zoning board process to present that sort of new spec replanting area so that you're comfortable with what's being proposed. Does that make sense?
Yes, so you're saying,
I'm suggesting that based on the recommendations for modified plantings, we could certainly come back and just show you what's been arrived at, assuming that the process moves forward.
do we need that as a stipulation?
You
No.
do not.
Okay,
Nope.
thank you.
And
Okay.
one other thing.
Yes, one other stipulation?
This is just a clarification on the hours. The application indicates daylight use only, whereas the Rotary Disc Golf rules indicate hours the same as all other parks. I would like to see daylight use only be the rule for the disc golf course.
Okay, does anybody have an objection to that? No. Okay, so
Can we request clarification from DPW about,
would DPW like to clarify that
I just don't want to
request
create
for a
any rules that don't
stipulation?
make sense? Yeah.
Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works. All of the park rules, parks are open from 7 to 10 p.m., 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., including all of Roby Park. So it seems like it would be unusual to say, okay, disc golf can't be open from 7 to 10, but the playground can be open from 7 to 10. So,
So then it's.
but it's something we certainly consider, but that is the ordinance, and that would be something actually that the Board of Public Works would need to take up, and the Board of Aldermen, because it is an ordinance.
Okay, so I totally understand that. What I'm saying is that in item 7 of your application, you are saying that it would be open for daylight use only.
Mhm.
So you're striking that from the application.
Well, daylight hours, of course, at different times of the year are different, right? I mean, we have daylight
Well, they're
till
never open.
9 or.
10 is never daylight.
No, that's true. That's true.
Around here.
Yeah. So I would be okay with that stipulation, honestly.
Which stipulation?
But we would have to, daylight hours. But
Okay.
we would have to have the ordinance changed in order to do that for disc golf. I don't have the authority to do that, I guess is what I'm saying. It would be up to the Board of Public Works and the Board of Aldermen to change that.
Okay, so we're going
But
to
I could certainly make that recommendation to them.
So the stipulation is that the disc golf course will only be available during daylight hours. Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Sullivan, you had a question or a comment?
I think we need to be careful here. You know, we have several uses concurrently going on in the park. We have, you know, there are trails that are actively used, and those may be used at night. I don't know. So I'm hesitant for you to make a specific recommendations about what the hours are. You could certainly recommend daylight hours, but I think ultimately, frankly, there may be a little pushback from our side. I'm not speaking for Lisa, but there may be a little pushback because it might create issues where we don't meet the ordinance, and then we can't compel the Board of Aldermen or the Board of Public Works to change the ordinance. So you can absolutely recommend it, but please understand that we may just not be able to ultimately implement that policy because it might be out of our control, if that makes sense.
I thought you said this was on
And-
the application, daylight use. So it's
How do we work it with the New England Mountain Biking Association? I mean,
So that's open dawn to dusk.
Hmm?
Dawn to dusk is the Conservation Commission properties. but
oh, yeah,
that's
because
different.
but that, right, exactly, because that's Conservation Commission
thinking
and
it's
it's
7
not,
a.m. to 10 p.m.?
Not park. Yeah.
That's just the rule for.
Yeah, I agree with you. Adding it as a stipulation when we really do not have control over that. And again, it's really not in our purview in terms of wetlands. So I would say,
Folks in the audience, please.
yeah, no comments from the audience, sorry. Yeah, Commissioner Sarno, I would request that you might withdraw that.
I will withdraw that.
Okay.
And
And
my only
that's
point
something.
is that the application, your application, actually says that the disc golf course will only be open during daylight hours.
Well, I don't know, and again, I don't play disc golf. This is not my project. I feel like I've been under attack a lot for this project. This has never been my project. This is a grassroots effort by all these people and many more. So I just want to be clear. I don't know anything about disc golf. I've never played disc golf. I just know that the community wants it. I don't know how you throw a disc in the dark.
Me neither.
Maybe there's a way. So I don't see that it would be utilized after dark, you know, honestly, just from a practical point of view. But the ordinance does say 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So that would have to be changed if we were going to have data.
Yeah, and again, I believe it's out of our
So
purview,
that's
so
all.
we'll,
Yeah.
so we'll just scrap that. Okay, are there any other stipulations that, okay, do I have a second for that motion? Commissioner, okay, reluctantly seconded by Commissioner Parati. I would like to speak to my motion, and then I will have each of the commissioners address before we go ahead and vote. You know, as we all know, this has been a difficult issue. However, I applaud the Department of Public Works for all of their efforts in trying to make the project as viable for the wetlands and for wildlife habitat as it has been. I recognize that the only way that we would ever be able to fully protect wetlands and habitat is to keep land totally virgin and native with no human contact. Unfortunately, with the population that we have, that is not a possibility. And unfortunately, in Nashua, we're not a Merrimack or a Londonderry, where other conservation commissions have the luxury of having thousands and thousands of acres of conservation land. We just don't. We're very limited. So I will be voting in favor of this. I do think that with all of the stipulations that we have, we are going to be able to manage it. I hope we are going to be able to manage it to the betterment, of the area, and that it will be, a cooperative effort between our Department of Public Works and the Conservation Commission to manage it to the highest levels that are involved in the New Hampshire Wildlife Action Plan. So, Commissioner Parati, you want to speak to the motion?
Sure. I do think that one of the risks here is soil compaction. However, if people are responsible and everything is managed accordingly, that might be a risk that can be mitigated so that everything can be enjoyed and also preserved simultaneously with care and proper oversight and management for the park.
Okay, Commissioner Sarno?
Sure. So I will be voting against this, largely because I believe that this project was implemented and planned without any regard to the wetlands or the wetland buffers. And I think that the slope that is on both sides of the wetland complex A, the soils there will get compacted and there will be erosion and runoff into the stream, wetland complex A. And I believe that 10 years from now, if I voted favorably for this, I would regret that vote. So that is why I'm voting against.
Commissioner Crook?
First, I'd like to apologize to the city who's here, and as well as the disc golf community who were here for my comments earlier about the city not being behind this. I'm a frequent user of those trails and came upon the construction when it first happened and called Director Photo almost exactly 2 years ago on the week of the 14th. And at that point, there was only one buffer impact, which was on the hole number 1. And I on the same day, I reached out to Matt, and ever since then have been checking in on this, and construction continued, and I was continually not given answers to my questions, and so that's part of my frustration here tonight is 2 years of that, and especially when talking to the city and saying there will be wetland impacts and being told that there wouldn't be, and then construction continuing. So I share your frustration, and I don't know why. I mean, these things move slow, and I appreciate that. And yeah, I thank you for your service. I know it's not my place to be critiquing it in this sense. I've shared this plan with disc golf players and with disc golf players who are wetland scientists, and the main things I've shared my concerns with them, and their what they have said back to me is that holes 17, 16, 15, 3, and 4 are this is not my, I don't know, okay? Are too close together, and that it doesn't make sense from a disc golf standpoint and from a wetland impact standpoint for them to be that close if we're trying to mitigate wetland impact. If it's just a park, and this is the way you want to do it, I totally understand. Working with a natural, it's being used as a, the stream is being used as a challenge in which to throw the disc over, and that makes a lot of sense. It's a problem. I understand the game. But in that sense, I think that the wetland impacts will largely be too high, and I don't think that's unreasonable to say. And I'm not opposed to disc golf in Roby Park in any way, but I can't vote in favor of this plan currently as it sits before me. And I understand that's frustrating to hear, and I'm sorry to say that.
Okay, and Commissioner McCarthy, Commissioner McCarthy, you certainly can make a comment on this, but I believe because we have a quorum, your vote will not be required tonight, okay? But please feel free to comment.
I'm impressed by the passion that everyone's shown for and against this. I have never played disc golf. Seems like a fine sport. Sounds like it'll get people away from their tablets and out into the environment, and getting kids off the screens is always a good thing. But reading through the disc golf course design elements from the Professional Disc Golf Association, your plans and what they say are at odds with each other. You're saying you're going to have only a 10-foot clearing for fairways, and according to the National Disc Golf Association, fairways in the woods typically range from 15 feet pinch points up to 40 feet wide. And if you tree larger trees, sometimes will need to be removed to create fair flight paths. So you're making very narrow playing fields. They also talk in here about, best practice. For best practice, but not always the case, players throwing from the shortest or tee to a forced throw over water that is normally 18 inches deep include a flight path that allows a player to avoid throwing over deeper water. Any normally dry trenches, some occasionally filled with seasonal water under 18 inches deep that are regularly in play, should have appropriate paths down to and out to be able to take a stance as needed and to retrieve discs. So even though you have bridges crossing the wetlands, the Disc Golf Association recommends having a pathway to get to the water to get your disc out of the water. So that's going to have a wetland impact there. Signage should be prominently before the first tee, and it should indicate how to bounce, so not just stakes, but actual signs and boundaries and any other areas that players should avoid. The out-of-bounds lines bordering, I didn't print all of it, sorry. The primary tee on each hole should have permanent signs, including the hole number, lengths, tees, directions if needed. If a hole has more than one target location, try to have a sign by or by an alternate tee position, even if it's just the hole number and length. Tee signs should be located so a player standing on the tee can read the sign, which should be removed enough to ensure safe and unimpeded run up and throw and follow through. And one that I really paid attention to here also is the layout. Fairways should not cross or be too close to public streets, sidewalks, paths, bike trails, pavilions, playgrounds, private property, or any other multi-use area where non-players congregate, like baseball fields, walking trails. Fairways should not cross one another and should be far enough apart so errant throws aren't regularly in the wrong fairway. Avoid designs where players might throw into blind areas where non-players could be walking or on a well-defined path parkway.
Okay, I'm going to have you stop there, because I think we get the idea, at this point, that you feel that the design that
The
was...
design that's being proposed is in keeping with the actual National Disc Golf Association designs.
May I speak to
Okay.
that?
I'm sorry,
May I
Director
just-
Photo,
yeah,
we're in the voting mode.
Okay.
Okay, so
I
I
would
would have to respectfully ask
Okay,
that.
okay.
All comment be
That-
finished at this time. Okay.
There's some misinformation there, though, that
Okay.
really should be correct.
So.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it's a good sport, but I think that I think it needs to be thought out a bit more to get it to fit into Roby Park, because it is using existing trails. And I don't think people that would normally use the walking trails would feel comfortable walking through a disc golf game any more than someone would feel comfortable walking through the middle of.
Okay. No, I'm sorry, we're in the we're in the voting mode, and, commissioners have the right, to express their opinion at this point. Are there any other questions or comments at this point? Thank you, Commissioner McCarthy. If not, I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Commissioner Parati?
Mr. Sullivan, did you have something to say, or shall we vote?
I am not a commissioner, I'm just staff to the committee. I just wanted to note that in the event that the motion on the floor, which is an approval motion, ends in a 2-2 tie, which I expect it will because you've indicated how you all intend to vote, that will result in an unfavorable recommendation. I'm just making you aware you do not need to then take up a secondary motion. Your vote as 2-2 will stand as the vote of record. It will look a bit odd, but it speaks for itself. And when we pass that on to the zoning board, we'll write some clarifying comments so that they understand the discussion that took place.
Commissioner Parati?
I vote in favor, as presented with the stipulations.
Chairman Dutzy?
I vote aye.
Commissioner Sarno?
I vote no.
And Commissioner Crook votes no as well.
Okay, the vote is 2-2, the motion fails. Okay, thank you, everybody, for your time. I don't believe, do we have any other reports for this evening, or should we just kind of like cash it in? I think, okay. I will entertain a motion.
I just have one comment. Deb wanted me to report that the forest management plan is really coming together, and I actually think she would give you a much better update if she was here tonight. But she's
The forest
forest management plans, she's close to getting that under contract. She just wanted for me to make you aware that that's very close to getting underway. We're going to focus on the Southwest Quad first because that's where we actually have funding right now, but we'll need to come back for further authorization at another time to do the Northwest forest management plan that you had reviewed.
So we're accepting the plan from Eric Radcliffe? Is that what
I believe so.
Yeah,
I don't want to.
because that's the only one we got.
I believe that's the only one we
Yeah,
got, so I believe we're, I
Oh,
just wanted to make
great.
you aware that that's our intent before the meeting adjourned.
Very good. Okay, is there any other old business, or do we entertain a motion?
Just an update on the land monitoring report.
Oh, yes.
Basically finished, we're just not yet.
Okay, good, and I did get a notice that they're looking for them, so, okay, great, thank you very much. And did we want to move, Commissioner Parati, did you have an opportunity to look at the specifications for the chainsaw?
I don't believe I received your email, but if you want to send that again, I'll
okay.
happily review that. Also, before we adjourn, on a more personal note, I recently passed my ISA certification as a certified arborist.
Congratulations. That's great news.
Thank you.
Here.
Awesome.
Yeah. So you can be our certified arborist?
With the backing of Corporation Council, I can contribute what knowledge I can, but I do not feel as though I have any personal insurance, so I'd want to make sure the city is backing me in any decisions that I might make for the commission.
I need to confirm this, but I don't believe you can serve as the formal arborist of
Oh.
the city necessarily. But to the extent that you're comfortable deploying your licensure in an advisory role to the commission, there's nothing to stop you from doing that. The only, I think, concern would, of course, be if there's sort of a competing nature in opinions, and that's something that we'll just have to resolve on a case-by-case basis. If another arborist issues an opinion, you're in disagreement with it, what weight does their licensure have against yours? And I think ultimately, we sort of have to accept their licensure, but if there's a fundamental issue, I think the commission will probably introduce some additional questions or look for additional information of the arborist that submitted the application. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think we have to be careful with you being a competing licensed arborist against someone who's submitted an application, because that could put you in a challenging position.
And I will just say that my certification is through the ISA, so it's quite potential that other arborists could be certified by the New Hampshire Arbor Association or
Yep.
the Massachusetts Arbor Association, which are all different rigor of exams and processes to get certified.
Congratulations, that's very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Crook? Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good job, everybody. Chop, chop, good job.